So the speaker, before he would act, so they couldn't serve. Whether Parliament, whether they would take that to mean that the speaker or Parliament, the office of Parliament frustrated the service and all of that, it doesn't mean anything to me, because there was an arrangement that you can only serve on Mondays. But because they wanted to serve separately from the arrangement that was made between the judiciary and the, so somehow they couldn't serve. Now, so the speaker went ahead and made a decision, made a declaration in accordance with Standing Order 18. He explained he explained his decision. He went and then wrote a decision and read the decision, which was consistent with what the previous speaker had decided. Although when he was reading, he did say that he was not bound by that decision. And so he made his own analysis and came to the same conclusion. And that's a conclusion anybody will come to if you read these provisions. Now, so now that he has made the declaration, it means that those 4 MPs were out, and now the NDC will now become the new majority. And so our friends, Alhaji and his group, they got angry. They ran back to court this time around, and then without filing, you know, before you file an injunction and all of that, you have to file a suit. Injunction has to be on the back of a suit, someone. So what they filed first was a suit to stop the speaker from acting, and then they were trying to serve the injunction, the application for injunction on the speaker, which they couldn't serve, and so that was not ruled upon. But quickly, when the decision was made, they went back to court on the back of the same suit that they filed first, which was not right, and then they asked that the decision made by the speaker should be stayed. The court agreed with that, and they went ex parte. I need to explain here too that, you see, when you are trying to serve a party in a matter, and you are having difficulty in serving the party, and you want to serve the party through another means, you have to go back to court. You always have to go back to court, seek leave of the court, tell the court that we want to serve by substitution, because we cannot get the person, or the person is dodging service and all of that. You see, and anytime you file any new process, and then you are required to serve the party, you have to make attempts to serve the party, and if you do not succeed, then you can go back to court again to seek leave. You cannot say that, for instance, you filed the suit, and then I tried to serve my uncle, my senior, and I was not able to serve him. And then I went to court for service by substitution. And then I got it, and I served him by substitution, maybe by publishing it in a newspaper, by dropping it somewhere and all of that. But then I filed a new process later on. I cannot say that because I had leave to serve one process previously by substitution, I can serve the new process also. I have to make an attempt again to try to serve him. And if I'm not able, then I will go back to court. So I don't really know, and I'm explaining this because I don't know the basis upon which they went to court ex parte. Because the kind of application they went to court with, they should have served the speaker. And if their reason is that we tried to serve an earlier process on the speaker, we couldn't serve. So this one we will not try at all to serve. So just listening to us alone and make a decision is wrong. The courts know that it is wrong. Just that the Supreme Court has room to act in any way they want to act, which is what we are seeing, which many lawyers think is not right, because then it is confusing us, because they have to be consistent for us to know. Because lawyers, when we go to court based on precedents and settled practices and rules and principles, and we know that when we go, this is the kind of outcome we are going to get. But when the courts can change their positions every time, then it becomes a problem. Now, so they now got an order from the Supreme Court telling the speaker to stay the execution, and then the minority, now it's not minority, the minority side, because then NDC now has become majority, they went and sat at the place of where majority should sit. And so the minority side decided that they will not be in Parliament. So they boycotted. So because they were not in Parliament, the speaker said that, well, we have quorum to transact business, that we want to make debate and all of that, but we can't take a decision. So even the court order that has come, if we have to take a decision on it, we need to have quorum, which you don't have, because they need about half of all the members of Parliament in order to make that decision. So if they do not have that, then they cannot make the decision. So they didn't have that on that day. So the speaker adjourned proceedings, adjourned Parliament indefinitely. That is where we are. And then the Speaker, after that, the Speaker now went to the Supreme Court trying to get the court to set aside. I have a lot of legal issues there also, but we'll reserve that for another day. Then that was thrown out, and then we are now waiting to see what is going to happen. But let me explain something why I think that the Supreme Court shouldn't have heard this matter at all, shouldn't have made a decision on this matter at all. You see, there's something called the political question doctrine. Whenever and these are common sense doctrine and principles made by very brilliant judges to advance the cause of democracy, to advance the cause of justice. For instance, when the Attorney General and the ambulance trial matter, the Attorney General tried to interfere or tried to get a party in the matter to implicate somebody and all of that. And many of us argued that, or maybe a few, I'm not too sure what many, a few argued that that could lead to mistrial. And then Senior Tadesori indeed filed an application for mistrial. You see, they came out and said that, oh, mistrial is not known by our rules. We don't know it. Laws, they said so. When demonstrators go on demonstration and they go a little wayward, and then they arrest them and they remand them for weeks, and we say, no, demonstrators cannot be treated as common criminals because demonstration is a tool for resistance in a democracy. And so even when they go a little disorderly, they are only, in fact, arresting them, there's nothing wrong if they are spoiling things. You arrest them, take them to court quickly, they caution them and let them go and discharge them. See, if they destroy anything of substance, if they will be fined, they may be fined. But I've never heard that in proper democracy, developed democracies, they will remand demonstrators for weeks. You see, when you make the argument, they will say that, oh, then they will start to tell you that criminals, this is the way they are treated. Then when it comes to this political question issue, you see, political question doctrine, all it says is that when the matter is purely political, for maybe one arm of government is a political matter, then the courts should not meddle in it because they have to deal with it there, right there. Parliament will have to deal with issues that affect Parliament, that is political. Now, to explain to viewers and listeners to understand that this matter, because I heard Chief Justice when she was reading, in fact, when Tadesori challenged the inclusion of one particular justice, and the Chief Justice said, this is a matter of interpretation of the Constitution, but not a political matter. To let everybody see that it's purely a political matter, you should see who took this matter to court in the first place. Now, when the declaration was made by the Speaker, the 4 affected MPs did not complain. It is very important for us to understand this. The 4 affected MPs, they did not complain. They didn't say that, oh, they were not heard. In fact, the Constitution doesn't require that they should be heard. The provisions over there doesn't require that they should be heard on anything. Once there's clear evidence that they have changed, they have moved to different parties, or they have become independent when they were elected as a member of a party and all of that, it triggers that provision. The Speaker did so. So they didn't complain. They didn't say their rights were infringed. Also, nobody from any of those 4 constituencies has complained. Nobody from any of the 4 constituencies has complained that they have denied them their representation in Parliament. So then who complained? NPP caucus. NPP caucus. What is their problem? Their problem is that by that declaration, their caucus has now become minority. So we don't want that. That's purely political. So we NPP, we want to still remain in the majority. So please help us. They coin it like interpretation of the Constitution. And I'm saying that, you see, the court, it's not a court that should open their arms down every time and people run there and say that, interpret this provision for me, and then, yes, you want to interpret it. Because sometimes you see, and you should sack them and tell them that this is pretty. In fact, there are basically 2 main reasons why the court should know. Yeah, the first one is that the provisions are very, very simple, very, very straightforward. That's number one. And then there's a president, as recent as 2020, president, another parliament, at the behest of the people who are now complaining. They were the ones that even triggered that, and then they ruled in their favor and they were happy. So this alone should be basis for the Supreme Court to sack them and say, how come? This is very simple. And then they decided this recently in your favor, and you are happy. Why are you now coming here? That's one. Then two is because it's a political matter. It is not a human right matter. The constituents have not complained. The MPs, affected MPs, have not complained. It is only the minority, the MPP caucus, that is saying that if this declaration stands, our position as majority will now change to minority. So Supreme Court help us. And we cannot just come and tell you that, oh, just help us. And so we'll make it like, oh, there's a problem with interpretation of that constitution. And so they went. So now, where we are now is that the Supreme Court, the Speaker tried to get them to set aside their decisions. They have refused. The court has refused. And they've advanced some, in fact, there are three main reasons. I think they talked about the fact that, what did they say? There's something about denial of the rights of the constituents on representation. People have, there's so much commentary about what they have done to SAL, even at North, when it was the same court that even injuncted Judge Kwesi. We know that. They've also talked about natural justice, that the MPs were not heard. In fact, apart from the fact that the provisions do not require that they should be heard on anything, because clearly the facts are clean. They were also in Parliament on the day the Speaker, in fact, if they were not even the physical, they were supposed to be in Parliament on the day the Speaker ruled. So if they had anything to say, they would have said it. Then there's a third reason, what is it? Let me see. There's a third reason that they gave, that the denial of the rights, they were not heard. Okay, well, if I recall later on, I'd mention. Now, so you would see that with where we are now, once they have refused to set aside the orders they made, it is expected that, and then also the new minority, they have asked the Speaker to recall Parliament, and the Speaker indeed has done so, and Parliament is going to resume on the 7th. We are all waiting to see what's going to happen on the 7th of November. I made a little write-up and said if I were the Speaker, I would defy the orders of the Supreme Court. In fact, if I were the Speaker, I don't know if the Speaker would do it or so. I acknowledge the consequences are there, but I know that if the Speaker is able to, or any Speaker is able to defy those orders, that person will be an icon in history. In fact, you made a big history. You'll be a hero. You would assert the independence of Parliament, but we don't know how it's going to come. But I also understand that the Speaker doesn't make decisions for Parliament. It's Parliament that makes its own decision. So Parliament has to sit on the 7th, and then if the Speaker is going to convey what the Supreme Court has said to Parliament, Parliament has to make a decision that day. And we are waiting to see what the new majority side is going to do, which is NDC side. If anybody wants to force on them a decision of the Supreme Court, they can also decide to walk out, just like MPP has done, and there will be no quorum for making decisions. And then we shall expect the Speaker to, if it's not going to defy the orders, we shall expect the Speaker to again adjourn the House indefinitely. That one, nobody can tell him not to adjourn the House, because the standing orders also give him the power to do that. That's my submission.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are still waiting for Kari Nubi of the Movement for Change to join us, and also for lawyer Susu, who is Member of Parliament for Medina. So he will be involved in what decisions are made going forward. Well, but before, so I'll come to Comic Chrissy Price shortly. But before I do that, just a couple of your comments that you're sharing with us. This Edward Dugbaza says, Article 97(1)(G)(H) states the MPs must vacate their seats in Parliament immediately they stop doing business with the party that sent them to Parliament. Then it continues, the Speaker is not the Speaker is not supposed to say anything. Samuel Evans Otta says even the South people who complained didn't get a hearing, but the MPP women, but the Supreme Court is speaking and seeking a hearing for the people that are not complaining. Patron Solo says, are you saying that because the Supreme Court is a small God, everything they say must be obeyed, even in the full glare of the citizens that they are wrong? Come on, they should not. Okay, thank you very much. that is some more of the messages that you're sending to us. Teacher Shamsu says, Senna, who will advise the justice of the Supreme Court and Chief Justice to distance themselves from the politicking? Senna, how on earth will these justices always think the same anytime a case relating to NDC pops up? It is about time the NPP realize that this country is not theirs and that they can't always have their way anytime an issue of this nature surfaces. Well, we in the NDC are currently waiting for 7 December so we elect JM to turn around the misfortunes machinated by this NPP government into great fortunes for the generations yet unborn. Mensa Sister says, my question, can a new government do something with the this question keeps coming up with the current Supreme Court and the Judiciary when the NDC comes to government from 2025. And Abdul Ghaffar Mohammed says, can any institution have a law that is not in line with the Constitution of Ghana? Come in.
Well, I mean, to start with, I've made extensive comments on the Supreme Court decision. And it is not my intention this morning to repeat all the comments that I've made before. What I'd like to emphasize that it is only in Cuckoo's Land that the assumption can be made that a Supreme Court decision necessarily stops all disputes. It doesn't. As we speak here, as we sit here, the conflict in Boku is raging. And the conflict in Boku is raging in spite of numerous Supreme Court decisions. So Boku should tell us very clearly that the assumption that the Supreme Court is the final arbiter in legal disputes and so on cannot be understood that once the Supreme Court makes a decision, disputes vanish, conflicts vanish, and so on. It's not true. Boku is the clearest example. Now, the second point that I like to make, and this point has been made by several people, it's not my original thought, is simply that decisions of the Supreme Court have to have a certain level of consistency. Because if they fail to have a certain level of consistency, what it would then mean to ordinary mortals like me and so on, that every judge and any judge can decide anything, and that the law itself has no consistency. In which case, the interpretation of the law will be seen as a biased enterprise. And once you begin to see that the interpretation of the law is a biased enterprise, and is not rooted in principle and so on, we create conditions for general anarchy in our society. Now, why do I say this? I say this because that day when I listened to the Supreme Court judges, those who were empaneled, when I listened to them, one of the reasons they stated was that the Supreme Court has jurisdiction, appellate jurisdiction, in all judicial decisions. And Senna, I was so shocked. Because the Supreme Court of Ghana has in an earlier case decided that when it comes to election disputes, the Supreme Court does not have appellate jurisdiction. The Supreme Court had told us that if you look at the relevant sections of the Constitution, articles in the Constitution, which deals with, election disputes are to be heard by the High Court. And that the Constitution expressly says that if parties in the dispute are not satisfied, they may appeal to the Court of Appeal. And that because the Supreme Court is not expressly stated in the Constitution, the Supreme Court has no jurisdiction when it comes to election disputes. So at least in one instance, the Supreme Court has told us that its jurisdiction is not over all matters or all decisions that are taken by the judiciary or arms of the judiciary and so on. So how come that the Supreme Court is taking this decision? And the shock of it is that it's a unanimous decision. Okay? The shock of it all is that it's a unanimous decision. So the question that I'm asking is that if the same panel which had heard the previous case had heard this case, what would the verdict have been? And if the verdict would have been different, what is the message we are sending to the Ghanaian people? That the decision of the court depends on who are members of the panel. That's a bit worrisome, okay? And many people have made this point, including lawyers of repute and so on. They've made this point and they've made it very, very strongly. Now, the other thing that I find extremely strange is the demeanor of some of the judges. And the judges themselves will tell you that demeanor is important. When they're trying cases, one of the things they take into account is the demeanor of witnesses who appear before them, the demeanor of parties to the dispute, and the demeanor of accused persons and so on. Is an important consideration in law. So I'm not making it up. Now, if you look at the demeanor of some of the panel members, it is worrying. And indeed, I read one newspaper which made the point about the anger displayed by the Chief Justice. I'm saying that Chief Justice, judge of the Supreme Court, a matter of constitutional interpretation has been placed before you. Where does the anger come from? How can you be angry? Indeed, you are not expected to display anger, which is an emotion. You understand? So that anger itself raises many substantial questions. And it was displayed, in ways which I felt as a citizen of this country were unpalatable. You understand? For example, I heard the Chief Justice say, in a demeanor which can only be seen as anger, that how come, where is this country going to, and so on? How come that in the midst of all that is happening, Parliament is not sitting? There was nothing before the court about whether Parliament should sit or not sit. The issue before the court was not about Parliament sitting or not sitting. You understand? And yet, she made this comment in open court. And I think that comment, judicial notice can be taken of that comment. Then there was a point also where she actually went into exchanges about why the Speaker had not filed, or the lawyers of the Speaker had not filed their responses, to the case which had been filed by the plaintiffs. And I'm a layman. I didn't go to law school. I'm sitting at home. And I'm saying that, look, what am I missing? The lawyers of the Speaker had gone to court to ask the Supreme Court to set aside decisions that it had made earlier because the processes were legally invalid. That's the case they took to the Supreme Court. Now, that carries an assumption that as far as they were concerned, there was nothing illegal and substantive before the Supreme Court. How can they answer? Master, how can they answer when they think that, properly speaking, legally speaking, constitutionally speaking, there was nothing valid before the court. So their case before the court to set aside the decisions of the court is a response. It is only after that has been dealt with that they may or may not file, responses to the original case before the Supreme Court. So I was really surprised. And then instantly, the Chief Justice poses a question to the lead counsel for the Speaker and says, can we go ahead without you? Now, this is the same court which had insisted that anybody whose case is being heard needs to be given a hearing. Being given a hearing was so important for this panel. And yet, at the same time, when it came to the Speaker, they wanted to know whether they could go ahead without the Speaker. In fact, they pressed upon the Speaker's lawyers that they could vacate their rights to make an appearance, to participate in the decision. And I found that exceedingly strange. Now, Senna, I think that there are some principles which ought to be made very, very clear. To all public servants, including those who sit on the bench. Okay? Why do we have a Supreme Court? Why do we have Supreme Court judges? One, we have a Supreme Court and its judges only because all the 32 million people of Ghana cannot sit in judgment in cases. Okay? So our power, our right to judge, to interpret the Constitution and so on, is delegated to some people to act on our behalf. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So anytime the Supreme Court sits and makes a decision, it is making that decision in our name, in the name of the people of Ghana. Anytime the Supreme Court makes a decision, that decision rightly is made in the name of the people of Ghana. Okay? Now, the Supreme Court itself is a creation of the 1992 Constitution. Okay. Now, this 1992 Constitution did not fall from heaven like the tablet on which Moses' 10 commandments were found. It was political struggles, political negotiations, and so on, which led to the crafting of the 1992 Constitution. And in the process of fighting for change, fighting for a return to limited democracy, what others will refer to as bourgeois democracy, people died. People lost their lives in that struggle. People suffered imprisonment. Many, many sacrifices were made in order to craft that Constitution. So at every stage, we, including the Supreme Court judges, should be asking ourselves whether or not decisions which are being made today are in tune with all those who sacrifice so much, and so on, their aspirations. Is this what they were expecting? You understand? Is this outcomes for which they laid down their lives? Are these the outcomes for which people suffered so much in order to craft the 1992 Constitution? Now, the Supreme Court has made its decision. Okay. And I think that it is possible for us to look at the practical outcomes. Possible. Practical, possible outcomes. I've seen a letter written by a young man to the Speaker of Parliament, in which this young man is actually warning the Speaker of Parliament that if he doesn't accept the decisions of the Supreme Court, it would amount to a high crime for which he can be impeached, and so on. I mean, obviously. Now, I'm sitting at home reading this letter, and I'm wondering, indeed, Parliament would make its decision. It is possible for the Speaker to convene Parliament on the 7th of November and announce the decision of the court, and to tell Parliament that this is the decision of the court. What do we do? Parliament can take a decision on it. Okay. Now, if Parliament doesn't have a quorum, that decision would not be taken. Parliament needs a quorum in order to be able to take that decision. And if Parliament does not have a quorum and can therefore not take that decision, it means that Parliament would not continue to sit. So the Supreme Court decision would actually not be implemented. Not because the Speaker wants it or does not want it, but simply because the House would not have the quorum for making decisions. That's number one. Let us say that the Speaker goes to Parliament and says that I make those orders, I'm withdrawing those orders. That's another possibility. And therefore, the MPP group, not caucus, the MPP group in Parliament, I'll explain that, the MPP group, not caucus, is the majority. If the Speaker were to make that declaration in Parliament, and the NDC side decides to walk out, will Parliament be able to sit? What will be the effect of the decision of the Supreme Court when the NDC group decides to walk out, to protest, and so on? And the NDC group has a right of protest, the right to protest. If they decide to protest in that matter, that decision of the Supreme Court would mean nothing, would have no effect, and so on. Okay. Now, let us also assume that the Speaker decides to defer the Supreme Court. How is the Supreme Court going to enforce its decision? Is the Supreme Court going to order the police to arrest the Speaker? Is the Speaker going to be arrested? Is the Speaker going to be imprisoned? And what will be the consequences of that for the work in Parliament and for the practice of this limited so-called bourgeois democracy in our country, if such an order were to issue? And in any case, if such an order were to issue, will the security forces, perhaps the police, effect that order? So what will be the consequences for all of us? Now, let us say that the Supreme Court then decides to charge the Speaker with contempt for not respecting his decisions or for obstructing his work. Now, if you read the Constitution very, very carefully, Parliament itself can also hold all citizens, including panel members of the Supreme Court, in contempt. So what if the Speaker also cites the panel members for contempt? What then happens? I hope you are getting the picture. What then happens? What crisis would we have created? And what are the options for getting out of this crisis? Now, the point ought to be made that Parliament as an institution is a place for debate. It's a place for reaching compromises. It's a place for negotiations and so on. You understand? That is the nature of Parliament. Now, have we come to the point where Parliament as a forum for debate and negotiations no longer exists? Have we come to that point? Have we come to that point where Parliament as a place for negotiations no longer exists? And so on. And if we come to that point, what is the value of this democracy and so on? You know, these are concrete questions which I think that all of us, you know, need to answer. Okay. Now, I've made this point also about minority caucus and majority caucus and so on. And interestingly, the Supreme Court itself made reference to a minority caucus and a majority caucus. And I found it extremely strange. Now, because what happened in Parliament after the 2020 elections is that we had a hung Parliament. A Parliament in which there was no majority and there was no minority. MPP who had 137 members of Parliament and NDC had 137 members of Parliament with one independent candidate. So the MPP caucus could not be the majority, and the NDC caucus could not be the majority. So some decisions had to be made. Now, strangely, and I say strangely because I disagreed with the Speaker's ruling. Okay. The Speaker came to the conclusion that instead of having caucuses of parties, they should have groups. And the Speaker decided that the independent member of Parliament could join the MPP MPs in order to form the majority group, not caucus. Now, why did the Speaker do that? The Speaker did that because of the very, very provisions of the Constitution that we are talking about, which prevent crossing carpet. Because if the independent member of Parliament had joined the MPP caucus, he could have been, according to the Speaker, he could have been deemed to have crossed carpet and therefore should have lost his seat for by-elections to be conducted in his constituency. So the Speaker, in his wisdom, then decided that he joins the MPP group and not the MPP caucus. And that makes the MPP group the majority group and not majority caucus. Now, I have a fundamental disagreement with the way Parliament approached the issue, especially the Speaker. And that is simply the fact that we have always operated on the assumption that there will always be a majority and there will always be a minority. And because of that, the standing orders of Parliament, which are the rules governing the conduct of business in the House, has been crafted on the basis of majority versus minority. Now, when we got into a situation where we saw that it was no longer to operate on the old tradition and so on, we should have been able to craft a new standing orders which takes account of a hung Parliament where there's no majority and minority. Now, instead of doing that, we took the easy route and now created groups instead of caucuses and allowed this independent candidate for all practical purposes to cross carpet to the MPP. And that's my problem. Okay? So if you take the results of the parliamentary elections of 2020, there's no majority and there's no minority. This majority and minority was a creation of the Speaker based on his own ingenuity and so on. He created this. Now, if you look at Article 97, G and H, as far as I'm concerned, the meaning is clear. The meaning is clear. But then there are others who argue that, yeah, the meaning may be clear to you, but it may not be clear to us. And for as long as there is some dispute about its interpretation, then we have to go to the final arbiter when it comes to interpretation of the Constitution, which is the Supreme Court. Fair enough. Let us just apply logic. Just plain logic, not difficult logic. I mean, the logic which sometimes is referred to as common sense. That's all. Let's take the case of Honorable Cynthia Morrison. That's the case of Honorable Cynthia Morrison. Honorable Cynthia Morrison was elected not as an independent candidate. She was elected, her constituents elected her to go to Parliament as an MPP parliamentarian, to join the MPP caucus and to use the floor of Parliament to ensure that the manifesto of the MPP, the agenda of the MPP and so on, can be implemented. That's how she was elected. You understand what I'm saying? Now, Honorable Cynthia Morrison has decided, it is not a rumor, notice of polls have already been filed. She has decided that she's no longer able to represent the New Patriotic Party. She's not able to represent the New Patriotic Party. So, the people who elected her to go into Parliament to represent the New Patriotic Party and so on, her current position and the position of the electorate who sent her to Parliament are in conflict. Who can argue against this? They are clearly in conflict. Now, the MPP itself, by its own constitution, has said that Cynthia Morrison can no longer represent them because a provision in the MPP constitution says that anytime you stand against an MPP candidate, you automatically lose your membership. So you have Cynthia Morrison in Parliament. MPP says that you can no longer represent us. She herself says that I have no interest in representing you and so on. And yet the Supreme Court says that she must represent the MPP. What is this? Very strange. Exceedingly strange. But then the court also decides that it is taking this decision because if her seat is declared vacant, her people will have no representation in Parliament. And then I go back to the Judicial case. You remember? Where his seat was actually declared vacant. Now, when Judicial's seat was declared vacant, how were the people in Asin South, is it? Asin North,
yeah,
represented in Parliament when his seat was declared vacant? But maybe you can argue, put forward all kinds of arguments and so on. What about the people of SAR, who for 4 years have had no representation in Parliament? And it is not as if the Supreme Court is not aware of the fact that the people of SAR have no representation. For 4 years, no decision has been taken which enables the people of SAR to have representation in Parliament. So that's weird. That's strange, you understand? Now, all of these things, and in fact the NPP doesn't hide it, all of this legal maneuvering and so on, and in fact the Chief Justice alludes to it, has to do with granting tax waivers. You know, granting tax waivers to some companies that if the NPP doesn't have majority, its intention of granting tax waivers to some companies may not be realized. And the first question I ask is that, So all these tax waivers we've been granting in the last 7 years, what has been its effect? What has been its impact on the economy? Granting tax waivers, are they so very important as to push us into this completely unnecessary crisis, tax waivers? Has anybody taken the trouble to do a study about the impact of tax waivers on the economy? And why all of us should be dragged into this needless controversy and so on over the ability to grant tax waivers and so on? I don't know. So now the other issue which has been raised is simply the fact that next year, 2025, there ought to be a budget. And that budget ought to come before Parliament for approval. I don't know where that is coming from. The practice has always been that because of the possibility of getting a new government next year, there will be no budget before the elections. You understand what I'm saying? That there will be no budget before the elections. And that after the elections, the new government will then have the opportunity of presenting its budget. And that what has to be done is some interim financial arrangements which enables the new government to function until such time that it can present a new budget. So that argument about government being put in jeopardy because it cannot present a budget and so on, where is it coming from? Where is it coming from? Now, I find this controversy also to be particularly needless. Particularly needless. Because for every bill or everything that will be presented to Parliament for a decision, that decision will be made simply by votes. And whether or not we are the majority group or majority caucus or minority group or minority caucus is inconsequential. Because it will be done by votes. Now, if you look at the current composition of Parliament, I am quite sure that voting in Parliament would not be along the lines of 137 for NDC and 137 for NPP. Never. How can that be? It won't. So whether the NPP group is declared as majority group or minority group, its ability to marshal the numbers in order to take decisions that are favorable to government and so on is already in jeopardy because of the internal politics in that party. So, to some extent, if you sit back and you watch this rigmarole, about minority group or majority group and so on, it sounds ridiculous. Now, let's say that 7 December arrives. Thank you, sir. 7 November arrives, and Parliament is recalled. The Speaker perhaps will be the last person to enter the chamber. As the Speaker enters the chamber, both NDC and NPP are struggling for the right side of the Speaker. But by that time, the decision will not have been made. Okay? The decision to accept the Supreme Court verdict or not will not have been made. So, there will still be the contention. What happens? Some have even suggested that it could lead to scuffles and so on. How is the Speaker able to take control of this situation and accept the Supreme Court decision or not accept the Supreme Court decision? I want to submit that the way out of this apparent crisis is not a Supreme Court decision. The way out of this apparent crisis is a very, very high-level display of statesmanship. Very, very high display of statesmanship. The exercise of simple gumption. The way out of this problem presents a test to the negotiating ability of the ruling elite in Ghana. So that's the point now. Okay. Early this week, I did an interview with a retired appeals court judge. And he said, you know, on mic, that he really misses Che Mensa Bonsu. That if Che Mensa Bonsu was still the majority leader, we would not have come to this. And I've heard many others say that they miss Che Mensa Bonsu because he was adept at negotiation and so on. You understand? He did not push for confrontation where confrontation was avoidable and so on. Perhaps we should all agree with this retired judge of the courts of appeal. I don't want to think that all of this maneuvering is about positioning for the 2024 elections. I don't want to. You understand? But Senna, I'm already beginning to see some signs around the 2024 elections which are extremely worrying. And I hope that this is not one of them. I mean, I was shocked to the marrow when I heard the U.S. Embassy make a statement that those who don't play the game by the rules and so on will be refused visas to the United States of America. What nonsense. The United States of America is not heaven. So if people don't go to the United States of America, so what? The U.S. has no authority to decide the legitimacy of what we do as Ghanaians, how we hold our elections. So the U.S. has no role to play in it. Those decisions must be made by the Ghanaian people. Because we do know that wherever the U.S. has made such interventions, it has only led to chaos. Look at Venezuela. Look at how the people of Venezuela are suffering because of this needless intervention by the United States of America. Sometimes it's not even about elections. It's about political choices which are not necessarily about elections. Look at Cuba. Look at what they've done to Cuba. 2 million people have died in Iraq. We are not expecting the United States of America to decide for us what processes we follow or we do not follow. The U.S. has no business and they should stay out of this. The people of Ghana have the capacity to decide for themselves whether elections have been rigged or not. And when elections are rigged, the people of Ghana who fought and defeated classical colonialism, who have changed governments many times and so on, will do it again. Why? The U.S. believes in democracy. It is the belief of the U.S. in democracy which led it to sponsor the 1966 coup against Kwame Nkrumah. Is that what we're being told? And indeed, all the problems we have today can be traced, or most of the problems can be traced to the 1966 coup. The U.S. The U.S. which was involved in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba because of his political views and so on. It has no role to play in Ghana, no role to play in Africa. They should shut up and leave us alone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, we're still expecting Courage Nobi to join us and also Honorable Francis Xavier Susus to join us. We'll take a break. When we come back, I'll go through some of the comments you're sending on this issue, many comments that you're sending. I'll go through some of them, and if we do have them in the studio, we'll take their views. If not, we'll move on to the next topic of discussion. This is the Mother of All Talks with Alhaji and Alhaji. Stay with us.
Of freedom, he's the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer.
filing of an application to set aside the race on that basis. Indeed, the grounds for such a contention will have to be in a statement of case filed at the point raised for determination by the court. And the court will notice that indeed that issue is actually one of the issues set out by the second defendant for determination. The second defendant does the Attorney General file issues for determination in this matter, and those are issues raised in for determination by the court. Respectfully, indeed, the application completely misunderstands and misconceives the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction. And I made the point that, indeed, the court would notice that Article 2, Clause 1 of the Constitution constitutes the principal mechanism, with all respect, for enforcing the Constitution. And in examining Article 2, Clause 1, I pray the court not to look only at the article, but to even read it with Article 3, Clause 1 of the Constitution. Article 3 of the Constitution, Article 3, the whole of Article 3 of the Constitution, imposes a duty on all citizens to defend the Constitution at all times. Respectfully, there is no better mechanism for defending the Constitution by seeking an interpretation of the Constitution whenever a provision of the Constitution is in contention or a controversy has arisen. My lady, the first defendant makes reference to an alleged denial of the right to a hearing on the authoritarian pattern by the filing of a motion ex parte. My respectful quick answer is that indeed the law even envisages such a procedure, and there cannot be a denial of any natural justice, right to natural justice, in the court entertaining an application for application ex parte. If indeed it was the case that whenever a motion ex parte is brought, there is a denial of the right to a hearing, then indeed the court ought to scrap from its procedures and rules motions ex parte. This submission is totally incongruous, totally offensive to the long or the age-old practice in this honorable court.
He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom.
Well, thank you very much for staying tuned to the Mother World Talk Shows, Alhaji and Alhaji. Let me go through some of the comments you're making on our discussion of the matter involving those 4 seats that are vacant. In fact, if you read the Constitution, you get the impression that they do not anticipate the Speaker to be the one to even announce it. That immediately you know you have left your party or you have changed your status, just move out. But anyway, we'll get there the coming week. A few comments. Margaret Pong from Tamale says, good morning, Senna. Chief Justice have allowed themselves to be, used by the, thank you very much for that comment. There's also this one, says, Senna, for the purpose of education, especially those outside the practice of law, what does it mean to seek an interpretation at the Supreme Court? Does the interpretation go with the judgment or ruling of the case? From the angle of my spectacles, I deduce politics concerning the position of the majority seats, since it's a key for the ruling government. By reflecting on the arms of government, I deem the term masters of our rules should henceforth be dropped quickly by institutions. We don't want any future interpretations. It seems there's an abuse of diplomacy and protocol in solving some problems in Ghana now. Ango Kwesi, you predicted that we will have a parliament of deals this year. I think the small experience by both sides is what is strongly influencing the involvement of the court. The leaders of our dear country should see that we, the young ones coming, are behaving worse than our fathers. God save the better Ghana we want to build. Snett said that. Thank you very much for sending that comment. This one says, if the speaker changes his mind and reverses his decision, he sabotages our constitution and MPP constitution. As such, he's not fit to be the speaker in the next government. Man on the streets. That is how he addresses himself. And thank you very much. There are more. This one says, do you know that over 100,000 do not get school or replace were placed in any school because they failed, and when they print their placement of school, there are no schools. Thank you very much. Please take your time and type the message, especially that is not related to the thing we are discussing today. This one is from Dennis Akwete. Says, and we are likely to see a subtle ignorance of Justice Kluge's admonition in the case of Republic versus Fast Track High Court, Accra ex-party Daniels, that the court must resist the temptation to rewrite Ghana's constitution under the cloak of constitutional interpretation, perhaps in some weird way. Indeed, given the demeanor of the CJ in dismissing the Speaker's application and the emphasis on representation, one can at least perceive what is ahead in determining the main case. Either we are going to see a weird interpretation of Article 97 contrary to what the ordinary man of the street of Makola believes to coincide with that of the plaintiff or the drafters of the Ghana's Constitution, 1992, instead are likely to be blamed for getting wrong their intention to come to same conclusion that the former would have produced. Ghana appears to be practicing democracy with strange human beings, but with Isaiah 33:22, we shall triumph. Shalom. That's Dennis Akwete who sent that. Alhaji Said Kucho is also joining us. Says, my advice to all Ghanaians is the constitution must be amended 90%. Otherwise, we'll always face such problems. Stop government from appointing judges, police, military, and others. If that happens, we will have a peaceful democracy as we want. Thanks, Alhaji. Thank you very much for that comment. More of the comments you're sending via our text message and WhatsApp line. The number is 0559 919 802. You can send a text message or WhatsApp to that number. I'll read it. This one, Senator, Ghana has no Supreme Court judges. They are all says they are all politicians. Akufo-Addo has destroyed Ghana's judiciary. The judiciary has become okay. Sami in Adenta, thank you very much for sending that comment. This one says the MPP thought they are the only people that read and write. They should give us a break and expect a heavy loss on 7 December. Derry Martin is joining us. Please kindly take your time. Sometimes I have to add words to your comments for them to make complete sense. Please kindly take your time and send a message. So, good morning. Please kindly help me with a question on what can be done to a biased and very detrimental decision made by the Supreme Court against the very people it is supposed to serve. Mr. Babi from Akwetiman sent that one. Then there is more. The Constitution must be amended to prevent President from appointing Chief Justice. Until that is done, we'll continue to have the CJ siding with the ruling government. To the CJ, kindly be neutralized and analyze every issue put before you make your ruling. There's also, this is progress from Osu. How can 4 people be in 2-party in Parliament? It is graceful to account. Okay, your comment is not clear. There's Frederick from Ashalibo who says, in an instance where the MPP MPs that have declared to run independent decide to join NDC in this particular parliament, amidst the back and forth to increase the number of NDC into a majority status, what will Afenyomakin do in reversion since he's interested in their reinstatements? That's an interesting suggestion. some more. This one says, good morning, Sana. Aaron, my opinion is that the CJ and others should not struggle to interpret English because it's not our language. This constitution must be translated in every language in the land so that the chiefs and people in the land can understand. A few more comments before we come to the matter of the power crisis that is looming. This is Stephen Kwabenya. The MPP boycotted the writing of the constitution, so they don't understand the words in the constitution. Saba James is also joining us. Good morning to you. Says, Uncle Dr. Toniedo, how are you? I'm happy to hear from you this morning. I love hearing from you. I feel very excited anytime I hear your voice. You are my mentor. James K. Saba sent that one. This one says, from Richard Bayemba Yoda, who says, I strongly agree with Lawyer Lipo. I think the speaker should ignore the ruling of the Supreme Court, which is currently sparing more of MPP wing. There's more. This one from Ho. Arnold says, when the Supreme Court and the executive branch are overly cozy, it can lead to erosion of checks and balances. The Supreme Court's independence is compromised, undermining its ability to hold the executive accountable. Selective justice, favorable rulings for the executive may lead to an equal application of the law. Constitutional violation, the court may rubber stamp executive actions disregarding the constitutional limits. Public mistrust, perception of bias undermines faith in the judiciary and democracy. And political polarization that cause legitimacy is questioned, foiling partisan divisions. More from you. Thank you very much for sending that comment. 2 comments. Then we'll move on to the next discussion. Musa Amavo in secondary says, after rendering the youth jobless and taxing 10% of their little bet, you are here promising what? Musa Amavo saying that and goes ahead to say, Bauman will be president because he has performed badly. Allah has ordained JM to be back and rescue us and finish the development projects he started. Almighty Allah. That's Musa Amavo. And let me conclude with Asanko in Santa Maria, who says, now, you see, the more reason why MPP members would always tell you to go to court, at least at the least opportunity. They know that if you go to court, you will definitely go and listen to a song in their favor entitled Unanimous. That's Asanko in Santa Maria. Those are some of the comments you're sending to us. If you just join us, the mother of all talk shows, Alhaji and Alhaji. Let's switch to the matter of the looming power crisis. Once again, I start with Lawyer Alipo.
Clearly now we Dunso is somehow back, and I think that the every indication is that we have the capacity, the power plans that we have, they have the capacity to meet our demand and a big time demand as well. But I understand that there are several difficulties, including debt, because they owe the ECG. ECG is that distributes the power. Gridco actually distributes the power, and is it Gridco? ECG distributes the power. Gridco is the one that transmits the power to the consumers. Yes. So they owe the independent power producers, and the current debt is about $2 billion, and I think that is also creating problems for them. Recently, I heard that Sunon Asogli, for instance, shut down its plant, and there were negotiations for them to reopen it, and so they are coming back to stream. And then also, I think the high cost of fuel, the government is not able to buy fuel. Then there's also system losses, but we have very high distribution system losses. It means the power that is produced, when it's being transmitted, they lose a whole lot of it also. And understand that is due to outdated equipment and all of that. So these are some of the issues, the challenges that are creating the problems for government. And all of these can be addressed by the administration, by government. They have to set up, if the money is there, they'll be able to retrofit the equipment. They'll be able to bring in new equipment. They'll be able to buy the fuel. And clearly, I think this government, I don't know what generation capacity or addition they have made to our generation, electricity generation in the country. I'm not too sure about that they have done anything. So, but they still will always refer to Dumsor when they are talking about His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. Every time they think that the word is synonymous with Mahama's time. And of course, because we had a prolonged blackouts at that time. Yeah, but then everybody also knows that he solved the problem before he left power. So, but they think it's one of the big things they can always hold on to. And so every time they go back, talking about that when they have not added any generation capacity at all, and then we are now back to this problem. So I think government has to sit up. They have to negotiate. The last time when I listened to the finance minister, for instance, and the relationship between his ministry, or whether it's the power ministry or energy ministry or whatever, and some of the IPPs, the independent power producers, was revealed. He talked about it, and for instance, he specifically talked about the Asogli, the Sunon Asogli, and trying to say that they didn't act in good faith. Yeah, because they had wanted them to pay some money, and I believe they were owed a lot of money. So, and I didn't think it was appropriate for him to have come out with even that. When even at the time that he was making those public remarks, the company had agreed to now sign I think they were having an agreement, settlement agreement or whatever. Yeah, they were now willing to come back and sign the agreement and start to give power again. So if you are treating your partners that way, and they don't have confidence in you, and they don't think that you can keep their information confidential, especially when you are negotiating, and in the course of the negotiation, it's back and forth, and because of the back and forth, they were also making some demands, and you couldn't meet their demands, and they said, well, if you don't meet the demand, then we will not come on board, and all of that, and you let the public see all of that, then we will continue to have this problem, and then they will also continue to let the whole nation feel that it's not their problem, they are not the ones causing it, or if there's anything about doing so, then it is about John Mahama. But I think Ghanaians, we are now very enlightened. We know the truth, and so they must fix it. I think they just have to fix the problem. They get the money if they are going to depend on the. I know the another problem I didn't mention is also the gas that we buy from Nigeria, also very costly. So if you look at all of the problem, you see that it's all about money. If you see if the economy were doing very well and there's money, if they hadn't borrowed too much money, and we are not in this mess when people's investments have been scattered and the people cannot even pay bonds, we cannot even pay our loans and all of that. If things were moving properly, I believe that we wouldn't be having this problem as well, you see, because at the time that we had the doomsday during John Mahama's time, it was because we didn't have many independent power producers. We didn't have many power plants, and we're depending more on the hydro, and if the water level is down, and we don't. But he made the effort to bring in, Kappa, Mary, and all of that. And so all of these are in the system now. And so this government, all they have to do is to make sure that they have the money, they pay the debts when they receive the bills, the tariffs from consumers. They pay the people who are producing the power. Then once they pay the people who are producing the power, and then they have the right equipment to transmit the power and everything, I think we would be able to meet our demand. So that's all I have to say about this. I think it's squarely in the court of the government of the day. And so if they are not able to give us power 24/7, and effectively we have to blame them. And then we can't go back and continue to blame somebody in the past and then letting people to remember that time and say that, well, it is better now than that. Then that is not the issue at all. And then we all knew the problem at the time, and the problems were solved. And now we are in a new era. They have to solve the problem now. However little the problem is, it is their problem. They have to find the resources and solve the problem. So we are looking at them.
Thank you. A few more comments that you're sending to us. This one says, when a thief encourages you to go to court, okay, let me find one. It says, when a thief encourages you to go to court. Be sure his brother is the judge. You didn't add your name. Just one. Is the MPP telling us that no accepting the Speaker of Parliament's ruling, they are representing 2 members for election? There's more. Says bye-bye to the MPP. 4 years have ended, but who knows? There's more. Osman says, okay, I'm Macarius from Tamalisana. I want to know when the law disqualifies parliamentarians from being members of parliament if they change their political lineage. Is it that if he or she changes allegiance during the lifetime of parliament, he has to continue until that parliament elapses, though he disagreed with his or her original party? I just don't get the Supreme Court ruling. Is it that halfway into the life of a parliament, I, as an NDC MP, I cross over to MPP, I'll have to be as such until parliament elapses? Thank you very much. Yeah. Very interesting questions you've asked. There's Musa Abatwa, who says, I totally agree with Mr. Kwesi Pratt. If the Supreme Court ruling is anything to go by, should it, in case GM assume office in 2025, which inshallah it is happening, Lawyer Maliba should be appointed as Chief Justice simply because he denounced his membership with NDC. With all due respect, law without the application of common sense is useless. For me, Supreme Court has not been fair to the people of Sao. If they are really emphasized on people's representation, hence the decision to deny Sao representation serves government's political interests. The future is pregnant indeed. Mr. Pratt?
Well, you know, some time ago, we were told that our energy crisis will be solved just by decoupling production from distribution and by introducing the private sector, bringing the private sector into the production of power. This is what we were told. This program was supported by the International Monetary Fund. It was supported by the World Bank, and it was vigorously promoted by the government of the United States of America.
Okay.
And it fitted into the neoliberal agenda. Now, Sana, we brought in the independent power producers. We effectively broke down the Volta River Authority, decided that the Volta River Authority should not be responsible for the Bui Dam project, and that the Bui Dam project should be decoupled from Akosombo. We brought in the Northern Netco, and so look at where we are. All those things which was presented to us as solutions have not been solutions. We've been hoodwinked again. Now our reality tells us that the answer to the problems, the concrete problems that face our people, is not the pursuit of the neoliberal agenda, which deliberately seeks to transfer state assets into private hands, and which deliberately insists that all aspects of our life involving production and distribution needs to be run only because it can generate profit. Hogwash, absolute nonsense. This is our reality. Okay? So that didn't work. And today, we have a power crisis. Now, the power crisis we have today is not because we don't have the generation capacity we have. We have excess capacity. Our problem is simply that the country's economy, we are so very broke that we cannot buy fuel for our plants. That's all. We are broke. We owe this Asogli plant $2 billion, and we can't pay them. And they're saying that if we can't pay them, they don't know how they can find money to go and get the necessary fuels and so on to continue generation. So they've shut down the plant. Either IPPs are warning us that they're also going to shut down because they cannot continue. This is the crisis. You understand? The country is broke. When the finance minister goes to the IMF and comes and says, we have turned the corner, what corner have we turned when you cannot buy fuel to generate power? So this is where we are. But you see, there is some very interesting history to all of this. After the February 24, 1966 coup, when the National Liberation Council took power and so on, they went and brought some European experts to come and evaluate, our energy needs. Don't forget that the opposition to Nkrumah had insisted that the Akosombo Dam was a prestigious project. It was too big, that the power that the Akosombo Dam was going to generate was too much for our needs and so on, and had actually sought to sabotage the Akosombo project by prevailing upon Kaiser and so on not to invest in the project. They had actually sent delegations to the United States of America to prevent the United States from investing in the Akosombo project, because they said it was an over-ambitious project. Don't forget that history, okay? Now, that history was overcome, and we managed to establish, the Akosombo hydroelectric project. But being the visionary leader that Nkrumah was, Nkrumah saw that some time to come, even Akosombo would not be sufficient for the needs of the Ghanaian people because of the industrialization policy and so on. So they sought to establish a nuclear plant in order to provide us with more electricity than Akosombo Dam could provide. The Bui Dam was also part of the project which the Nkrumah government envisaged in order to resolve the concrete problems that we have. As a matter of fact, by February 24, 1966, Russian engineers were already on the ground at the Bui Dam construction site, February 24, 1966, ready to build the Bui Dam for us. We sacked them. We sent them back home. The nuclear project was completely abandoned. And these traitors went to Europe, brought an European who advised us not to expand our capacity, that we don't need it. We don't need nuclear. In fact, a prototype nuclear plant which was supplied to Ghana by the USSR was taken to the United States of America, was given to the United States of America in order that American scientists study Soviet technology at that time. We had already signed a valid agreement with the government of the USSR. That agreement was abrogated. Look at where we are today. So this is the history, and it's an important history. You understand? The way some of our politicians think and the harm some political traditions have done to this country manifests in the doomsday that we are experiencing today. And it should be clear to all of us. Now, I had the privilege, I think in 2001, of interviewing a gentleman who was then the chairperson of Ghana's Energy Commission, and who, by accident or so, happens to be the father of Nana Asante Bedietu, the executive secretary to the president. And he predicted this situation. He predicted that Ghana was going to get into a severe power crisis from President Kufuor's era. And that it was going to take a lot of effort and resources to get out of this power crisis. Now, Senator, his predictions have come true. Okay? His predictions have come true. And he made this prediction from the realization that we were not adding any capacity to what we had already. And that for many years we had not added any capacity to what we had already. And that this crisis was going to catch up with us. So the crisis started in the era of President John Agyekum Kufuor. And I recall vividly that it was during that period that some of our archbishops and deacons and pastors and so on wore their gowns and put huge crosses around their necks and trooped all the way to the Akosombo Dam to go and pray over the dam so that God will pour water into the dam. You remember?
Vividly.
You remember?
It's difficult to forget.
Difficult to forget. That whole exercise was one in futility and stupidity. It didn't resolve the energy crisis. The holy water they poured into the dam was not sufficient to fill up the dam. And this is where we are. It didn't solve the problem. So to sit back and blame all the problem on the Mahama administration is to be disingenuous, because the crisis started way before the Mahama administration. Indeed, can you imagine our current situation if General Kutu Acheampong's government had not built the Pong hydroelectric project? Can you imagine what situation we would have been in now? If they had listened to the advisors who were brought in by the National Liberation Council and elements of the Progress Party, where would we have been today? So this thing about blaming the Mahama administration and so on is simply disingenuous, okay? But Master, it doesn't end there. There's something which is happening today which defies all logic. I mean, when you hear it, when you see it, because some of it has been put into political party television adverts and so on, so you see it, and then you begin to ask yourself, really, what is happening? Where has logic fled to, and so on? Today, November 2024, today, we are living in Dumso. Yesterday, there were lights out in my area. Everybody listening to us know that we are living in an era of Dumso. Mm-hmm. The governing party and the government, the governing party and the government, in this era of Dumso, is telling the electorate not to vote for John Mahama because in his era there was Dumso. Hey! Sana, what is happening? Can you believe that? We are living in Dumso today. Today we are in Dumso. The governing party and the government, so pretending over this Dumso, is advising the electorate not to vote for somebody because in his era there was Dumso. I have nothing more to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I go back to more of the comments you are sending to us. And this is, okay, let me go to Facebook first. For those of you who are joining us via Facebook, there's Prosper Mensah, who says, Ghana is truly an interesting place. Praying for water to solve power generational problem. Nasir Mohammed is also joining us. Says, good morning. When this MPP mafia were going around saying they are keeping the power on, I was thinking that they were jumping the gun because the bankruptcy was staring us in the face. They said the economy was sound when everyone was warning of impending implosion. Slogans and lies can't hide the truth. The reasons for the tussle in the Supreme Court is a warning that this mafia is ready to do anything to hang on to power. I fear for 7 December, the future is pregnant. May God help us remove the mafia from power. That's coming from Nasir Mohammed. Merima Kwame Nkrumah says, why are we allowing the MPP to be so bossy over the whole of Ghana? There's Samuel Evans Otahu says, it appears this crop of current judges and Akufo-Addo are justifying the casualties. There's Nuvo Ebenezer Wuku who says, good morning, Senator, and all those who are on your panel. I thank all those who are on the panel. They are trying to let Ghanaians reason so that people who are not fit to be leaders of this country are not elected, nominated, or appointed to leadership position in this country. As for the judiciary, the less we talk about them, the better. Although there are a few genuine ones. Please tell Uncle Kwesi that I need. Okay, Nuvo send that from Sogakope. Okay, there's more from Eric Okusapanu who says, is the unanimous Supreme Court listening? Without truth, there's no justice. And our current judiciary is deficient and bankrupt of truth. Okay, Supreme Court leading the pack. There's Eric again says, I agree with Kwame Kwesi Pratt on his hatred for the U.S. duplicity and double standard in international politics because it only looks at its interest in hegemony in the third world. We must equally protect our democracy, hence their diplomatic directives. Slide the senior says, in fact, MPP government is a flat tie. You can't go anywhere until you change it. Reject Dr. Lies. Baumia has nothing to offer than lies, deceits. Vote John Mahama in the NDC. Send that from the greater Accra region. Daniel Tess says, happy to see you, Mr. Pratt. I wondered why you were not coming here for a while. Welcome back. Kofi Atunga says, NDC is as useless as they are. Why have they not taken the issue to court? Okay. There's okay. These are some of the issues, comments that you're sending to us on Facebook. Let me do a few more from our WhatsApp platform. This is Joseph. Okay, you haven't sent a message. He just says I should say hi to Uncle Kwesi for you. Joseph is listening. There's Remy from Upper West, specifically Dafiama, who says, tell Uncle Kwesi that he's my mentor. I cherish his presentation. There's more from those of you joining us via the WhatsApp platform. There's the MPP is very dangerous to our democracy, but the NDC should note that the MPP has deployed people going to mosque to campaign on religious grounds. That's Nana Kojo. Thank you for that comment. There's this one, the MPP should start preparing their handing over notes because JM is taking over by 7 December 2025. That's coming from, he says the following staff must be sacked as a case of emergency where JM take over. He has outlined some of the people who should go when former President John Dramani Mahama takes over. Joseph, thank you very much for that comment. This one says, a good morning. I wish my father was alive. He was a village judge who judges cases in place of our chief. We will always tell you that principle cannot change no matter who is involved. The Supreme Court should know that whatever judgment they give today to comfort Akufo-Addo, and then people will come back to mute their supreme mouths in the future. Supreme God help them to tap into your supreme knowledge. Kofi G sent that from Ablikuma. There's this one says, Kofi sent this from Akachi. Do you know what is worrying the Supreme Court? When Achachu quoted Hosea 8:7, to them they thought he was joking. When JM says posterity will judge, they were only dreaming. Their traps will fail them this time. No sector is working. Education is something else. That's coming from Kofi, who sent that comment. So those are some of the comments you're sending to us via WhatsApp line. Okay, this one says, good morning, Sana. ECG is not a serious company. You don't have money to buy fuel, but you have so much money to buy new meters to replace all the existing meters we're using in the country. Okay, that's currently ongoing. In fact, there are many places where they've changed the meters. They said that will make them more money. This one says, please, whatever excuse MPP is making over serious hardship, they have put this country into. Let no Ghanaian make the mistake to vote Nanado the third term Baumia coming in is the third term of Akufo-Addo. The same people. Some more says, is it not ridiculous for the unpatriotic MPP members who refused to partake in the promulgation of the 1992 Constitution are today trying to interpret it to those who wrote it? Are they serious? Asanko sent that from Santa Maria. So if you are still commenting on the old man, our very first topic of discussion, Stephen Nkwabenya says, this same CJ Tokonu was among the justices who injuncted Jechi Kwesing. I see. Then there's this one from Mary Amma, who says, good morning. Please tell Uncle Kwesi to write down the truth for us, the youth. Then Felix from Ashaiman says, always want to listen to Uncle Kwesi. He speaks a lot of wisdom. There's Jennifer Kudivo, who says Supreme Court is very disappointing. Send that from Mama Saman. That's all you say. There's also Ibrahim from Gold House. So now equal to the good works. Please, my regards to Uncle Pratt. Okay. So those are some of the comments you're sending to us via the WhatsApp line, and I'll go through as many as possible as we go along on the show. We have to move on to another discussion. This time around, it has to do with the issues happening in Boku. Now, like I said, so far, the counts put it up to 20 lives lost, including persons who had nothing to do with the conflict. In fact, on Monday, I had a conversation with one of my colleague reporters who shared a story of how his brother, who is a chief, was on his way to Bolga, got caught up. He was able to escape, but the people who were accompanying him, 4 of them were shot dead on the spot. There are many people who were killed as part of the conflicts. What started it for a lot of people, and if you listen to the account from Boku, what started it is a chief whose installation or enskinment has been a matter of, in fact, a warrant was issued for him. A court withdraws the warrant. The next moment, the guy ends up in Boku. Celebration starts. The other side gets annoyed. And, of course, we are back to where we were. How do we get a solution to the Boku crisis? Well, I'll start again with Lalipo on this issue.
Well, the Boku issue, it's a very serious one. I heard from somebody from the area that even most of the killing that is happening now, it's not even happening in Boku itself. They said it's at Waliwali, rather at Waliwali. And yet the curfew is imposed in Boku, but not Waliwali. You know, and so the accounts that are coming from the grounds, they do vary in some ways. But whatever the case, you see, when you have crises like this, we have a responsible government, they are the only ones that can curb this. They are the only ones that can stop it. You see, so we can't stop blaming government, you know, and again, I heard John Mahama say that these problems, especially the problem in Boku and a few other places, they only come up when MPP is in power, you know, and I cast my mind back and I realized that some of the grievous atrocities that were committed in the name of chieftaincy and all of that, especially in the north, they happened during MPP's regime. I remember the beheading of Yana and all of that. That was during Kufuor's administration as well. And so I don't know whether the government, it is the supporters of MPP, whenever MPP is in power, they think that is opportunity for them for whatever issues they have, local issues they have to resurface. Because if MPP was not in power for a very long time and these things were not coming up, it means that the governments that were in power at the time were able to keep these things on the silent. They were able to, and that's all we needed anyway. We needed peace for the areas to develop. So if MPP would come and then all of a sudden people will rise up and then chiefs will come up and I think that I saw the women the last time, and I believe women from both gates, that's both tribes that are in this field. They came up, they demonstrated, they wanted peace, and that is good. That is what should be happening, and they are, when they do that, they are doing it for all of us. But because we are not able to do anything. We don't have power. We don't have the means. We don't have the resources. We have that is how, and that is the reason why governments are elected. Governments are elected to protect the people, to serve the interests of the people. And so when governments are elected, when MPP Nana Akufo-Addo and Bawumia are elected, and this is in his area, Wale is in Dr. Bawumia's era, so we don't know. He's not even saying anything about it. So we don't know this. So I remember the parliamentary contest in his own backyard anyway. That was a conflict also, a big conflict between, I understand, his sister and his special aide, or one of his aides, that were battling for a parliamentary seat. And we saw the chaos that transpired until some time before somebody gave up. And so I don't have confidence that he will be able to even do anything about it. That's why he's not even speaking about it. And clearly, if he wins power, I don't see how it's going to help solve this problem at all, because if now he's not even saying anything about it, if we can't go down and say, hey, my people, look, let's just come to the round table, let's smoke the peace pipe, let's see how best we can advance our interests, promote peace, and develop our area. If he's not doing all of that, how can we have confidence that if he become president, his people will not be emboldened? So I think that the government of the day is the one that we should, and you people in the media, you should be putting questions to the government, and you should be very critical about what they tell you and scrutinize the things very well. And then once you have your reporters also on the ground and they give you the other side of the story, you'll be able to push government further, because you see, the officials will always tell you something. They will always give some excuses. But if they are the same people who are at the background, they are the same people who are providing the arms and ammunition, they are the same people who are instigating the people, who wouldn't know. How would you know? So we have to make sure that we get reporters, they report the facts to us, and then you take it up, not politicians, not people like us who can only have a few minutes and up to about an hour or so to speak on your airways. But you people, you are the ones that you have to go out there, question government officials, and let them see that the work they are supposed to do, they are not doing it. And in this particular instance, once it is happening in Boku, and once it has something to do with Wale as well, we think that Bawumia has a big problem on his head, and we expect that he should say something about it. If he's not saying anything about it, I think that it should be pushed, and questions should be put to him for him to tell us the solution he has in mind, and how he's going to try to bring bring these people together to make sure that this problem is solved once and for all. So that's it. I've heard Honorable Cletus Avoka. Yeah, he has spoken a number of times about this, and he gave some historical background, which made a whole lot of sense to me, because this issue had gone to the courts before, to the Supreme Court. There was a ruling by the Supreme Court. There was one side that pulled out and all of that, you see. But because every conflict, there will be two sides, and that the reason I don't want to dwell so much on what he has said, although it makes a lot of sense to me, that, and because we're not hearing about this problem until again it has surfaced under Nana Akufo-Addo's regime, and so, yeah, well, that gives basis to think that it is supporters of the MPP that are causing the problem. But again, since I'm not seized with all the facts, I wouldn't want to stick my neck out. All I want to say is that the politicians and the government in power particularly, they should say something about it. I heard, again, John Mahama, he made a pledge, he spoke publicly and said that, look, it will be, when he comes to power, that issue, the crisis over there, will be the very first thing he's going to pay attention to, and he will make sure that he solves that problem forever. And if he's making that pledge, and we are not hearing anything from Dr. Bawumia, then the people of whichever side or the political divide you are, if you are in the Boku area, you are in Wale area, you should know the person to trust. You should know the person, because we all need peace. Whether you are having the upper hand in this fight, you still need peace, because it will also affect somebody that is connected to you, related to you anyway. So it is better that we have peace than to say that because we have upper hand, we can kill the other side, all of them, and so it doesn't matter. No, it matters. We need peace in order for the areas to develop. We need to recognize that even the local leaders, if you are not supposed to be a local leader, it has to be understood by all of us that you don't have a place there. Those who have those positions, they should take those positions. The rest of us, we also have roles to play in the development of our area. So let's see what they can do, especially as for Nana Akufo-Addo, he has checked out. He's on a thank you tour, thanking Ghanaians for his 8 years. Of course, though we all know that he had only one term, the second term was stolen, we know. But yeah, but of course, once he ruled for 2 terms, he's out there thanking the people and campaigning for Bawumia. But Bawumia is the one who says they should give him the steer. So if there are crises happening in his own backyard and we are not hearing from him, then we don't see what he's going to do if the steer is handed to him. So he should come up. We are all waiting. Those who are listening to me right now and who are connected to Bawumia anyhow, they should tell him that Ghanaians want to hear from him, to hear his view about the problem in his backyard and how he intends to solve it, and currently what he's doing about it.
Thank you. Papa BCU Nakra says our very dear country is temporarily very sick under Nanado Bawumia's government. On that note, allowing this regime to continue, the future is very, very bleak. A ball of kinky now is either 5 cedis or 7 cedis to $1. Now, a cedi to $1 now is hovering around 17 cedis. 14.5 kg of gas is now hovering around 250 to 260 cedis. And to worsen it all, selective justice at play. Animal farm kingdom. MPP government, 2 legs good, but 4 legs bad. It is really a pity. The verdict on 7 December is very clear. Let's kick them out of power. That's Papa BC who sent that comment. Thank you for that comment. This is Dr. Akovasegbefia, who says, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm aware that judges are by their codes not allowed to show emotions when adjudicating. So in many civilized jurisdictions, that outburst of emotion by our Chief Justice is enough grounds to get her removed from office. That's coming from Dr. Akovasegbefia. There's Martin Kwame says, those who pray for the rain should also be ready to deal with the mud. The Supreme Court must be ready to deal with any spillover from the atrocious absurdity of their judgment. We are all watching. The trajectory of our judiciary and the EC are currently moving is fast eroding the public confidence, hence making our democracy vulnerable. They must watch it and save this country. Martin Kwame said them. Send that from Soviet. Thank you very much. Abbas Amogobo in Ofinsu says some of us have no confidence in the Supreme Court. They are doing the work of their paymasters, thereby confusing all of us. I'm sorry, Akufo-Addo have achieved the collapse of all our independent institutions. Thank you for that comment. Musa Abatwa in Asawasi says, okay, I think he sent this message a bit earlier. Thank you for that comment. There is Prince Henry Koforidua, who said the 5 Supreme Court judges could not have accepted Speaker Alban Bagbin's plea to set aside their injunction pleas on Parliament because they felt that they would have become an embarrassment to themselves and the good people of Ghana. It is sad that the Supreme Court, which is to make things clearer for us, is rather making things difficult and confusing us. I still can't fathom that the Supreme Court said we can't use our birth certificate as proof of citizenship. The future is pregnant. Thank you, Henry, for that comment. Prince says, I never liked this CJ from the very day she appeared. He says, I'm very excited about the happenings at the Supreme Court. The reason is that the CJ shot herself in the foot with the unanimous decision. Secondly, her comment about why Parliament is not sitting. With these and other comments from her, makes it clear how she's digging holes around her. She's going to be okay. Thank you very much, Prince, for sending that comment. Tafai Namahia is also joining us. So I think the Speaker must halt the Supreme Court. Okay. He said he before Parliament for contempt of Parliament. Thank you for that comment. There's this one's thank you for those comments, and thank you for sending those comments. There are more comments coming on the Boku issue. Says the issues happening in Boku is a political problem under this MPP administration by the super incompetent Bawumia. Then this one says 35 days for Ghanaians to vote out the MPP government and Bawumia out of office. MPP is far away from victory with this cruel leadership. They have ruled us in a way and manner that even if Satan himself was the president of Ghana, he would have ruled us in such a manner. The shege this government have shown us and still showing us, we Ghanaians will not hesitate to replicate and vent our anger come December 7 general elections. Vote for change, vote for your future, vote the NDC, vote for JDM for a total reset of a country. Say to John Paul, send that from Tamale. Say to thank you. This one said the Boku crisis may be a strategic plan against the NDC. I think peace should prevail. NDC should do what they can to ensure peace before the elections. This one, Jennifer Kudivo, Adamasaman, says, if we are not careful about actions, we will be inviting terrorists to the Boku area. Jennifer, thank you for that comment. There's this one says, good morning, Mr. Senna. This is Felix Akufo from La Paz, New Market. I heard the Boku issue was caused by Dr. Baobia, and if it is true, then why are we heading to? So if it is true, why is it that brothers are afraid to come out and say it? That's coming from you. There's this one, Sylvester from Shama, who only says Afanimakins will lose his seat. There's this one, says Uncle Kwesi, your submissions are always on point. I really love you. There's more coming from you who are joining us. Says, please and please tell Uncle Pratt that we, the youth of New Age movement in Techima, need him very, very much. He sent that from Techiman Kiza. Thank you for that comment. This one, Haruna Intamali, senior comic Kwesi, I love you. God bless you and your family. And this one says, good to see Uncle Kwesi back. The vindictiveness of Akufo-Addo has led Ghana to everything that is happening in this country, from bad economy to violence everywhere, with impunity and lawlessness within his people. Nana is our problem, not MPP. BB sent that from Accra. Comrade Pratt.
Well, Senna, we are told that up to 20 people have died in this current conflict, the escalation of the conflict in Boku. Now that is just for this period. If you go back 20 years ago, 30 years ago, hundreds of people have died. Now, I have before me the daily graphic of Wednesday, October 30th, 2024. And the government's plan for dealing with the Boku crisis is captured on its front page. And it's headlined, Government Urges Ceasefire in Boku, Imposes Curfew, and Deploys Security. And the author of the story is Donald Ato Dapatem. Now, it is the Minister for Chieftaincy Affairs, my very good friend. He's indeed my very good friend, Asamoah Boateng, who is outlining the government's measures for dealing with the Boku crisis. So I'd like to read the graphic. This is not me, it's the graphic. It says, the government has called on all the people in the Boku chieftaincy conflict to lay down their arms and cease firing at each other. Call. The Minister of Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs, Stephen Asamoah Boateng, who made the call, reiterated the government's commitment to take all necessary measures to ensure the safety and security of the residents of Boku and its environs. Addressing a news conference in Accra yesterday, Mr. Asamoah Boateng said security agencies had been directed to enforce the curfew strictly and maintain law and order. He added that the government was guided by its responsibility to protect lives and property, and, above all, to enforce law and order to restore normalcy as quickly as possible. Residents are therefore urged to comply with the directive and to cooperate fully with the security agencies to restore peace and normalcy in the area, the minister appealed. His appeals comes in the wake of heightened security concerns in the area following a deadly gunfire attack on Sunday, October 27, 2024. Unidentified gunmen opened fire on travelers along the Bolgatanga-Tamale Highway near Jimsi, close to Wali Wali, and so on, so on, so on. Now, I want somebody to tell me how this is different from statements which have been issued over the last 30 years which have led to nothing. Same platitudes. Same platitudes. Unbelievable. Is this the solution? Appeals to people. Observe curfew. Appeals to people. Don't kill each other. And so on. Is this the solution? Unbelievable. But you see, Sana, the current crisis, how did it happen? The information we are getting is that some people met outside Boku and installed somebody who claims to be the Boku Naba and smuggled him into Boku at night to go and take over. Now, if you do this, what will happen? Now, are we saying that knowing the situation in Boku, our security services could not track these developments? Our security did not know that some people had met outside Boku, installed a chief, and were going to take him into Boku, and that taking him into Boku will result in death. Are we saying that we didn't know? And if we didn't know, what kind of security do we have? That we didn't know that Boku Naba was installed outside Boku and smuggled into Boku in the night. And that this has led to the death of 20 people. If we didn't know, what is the state of our security services? And if we knew and it happened, can we deny some level of how do they say,
complicity?
Complicity? If we knew and we allowed it to happen, can we deny some level of complicity? And it's important to look at the geographical location where these things are happening. Where was this Boku Naba installed? Where was he installed? How was he moved into Boku? These are legitimate questions that we have to answer. Because if you don't answer this question, we'll be beating about the bush. Curfews have been imposed every now and then. It hasn't resolved the matter. Appeals have been made to citizens not to fire at each other. It hasn't resolved the matter. What will resolve the matter is for our security services to be on top of their game, to know when chiefs are being installed outside Boku, and when those installed chiefs are being smuggled into Boku to go and start this fighting. If our security services know that and take preemptive action, we would not have a repeat of the Boku crisis. I've already made the point that Supreme Court decisions do not resolve these conflicts, because there have been several Supreme Court decisions on the Boku chieftaincy dispute. It hasn't in any way resolved the crisis in Boku. Okay. Now, for me, invariably, when these things happen, who dies? Some old farmer who is going to his farm, to cultivate some millet so that he and his family can get something to eat. He'll be killed. All right? Some body may not be a Kusasi, may not be a Mamprusi, may just be a public or civil servant posted there to go and help the people to administer their resources. He will die. Foolish death. He will die for nothing. And so on. The people who instigate this conflict, for various reasons, which may include political reasons and so on, they don't die. They survive. That's the pity of it. The big men and women who supply AK-47, you know how much an AK-47 will cost? No poor person can buy one AK-47. So if there are sophisticated weapons being used in these conflicts and so on, we must look for the big men and women the moneyed people who are behind these conflicts and who fuel them. It is not the ordinary people. The curfew which has been imposed, ordinary people are the people who are going to suffer. They are the people that the security services are going to clamp down upon and so on. They are not the cause of the conflict in Boku. The Boku conflict, its source can only be traced to big men and women. Big men and women with a lot of money, with a lot of resources. They are the people behind this. And we need to find them and to deal with them. You see, my brother, over the years, I've read security reports about the Boku crisis. And one of the things which really baffles me is the sophistication of the weapons which are being used. Where do those weapons come from? Military-grade weapons are used in Boku. Where do they come from? Who supplies the combatants with these weapons? And it's important for us to determine that in order to avert, this conflict. Now, only last week, I read a report of how Islamic insurgents or so-called Islamic insurgents operating in Burkina Faso and in the Sahel generally are using Ghana as their forward operating base. Is that true? And if that is true, then we should be careful that these conflicts in places like Boku and others do not become the festering ground for the insurgency we are seeing in Niger, for the insurgency we are seeing in Nigeria, and the insurgency we are seeing in Burkina Faso, Benin, the northern part of Benin and the northern part of Togo, to seep into our country. I'm worried. I have read a police intelligence report which says very clearly that these insurgents have established sleeping cells in Ghana, all the way below Tamale. An official police intelligence report. Are you not worried? Somebody sent a text message that they are buying kinky at between 5 and 7 cities. That's bad enough. But if in addition to buying kinky at between 5 and 7 cities, we have this insurgency imposed upon us, what would happen to us? What will happen to our country? What will happen to our democracy and so on? So the matter before us is one which can have very important consequences for the practice of bourgeois democracy. It is one which will have very, very important consequences for kinky and fish issues and for the general security of the nation. I think we should take it more seriously than we ever did. And appeals at press conferences for citizens not to fire on each other is not a solution to the problem. I think I've finished.
Thank you. Thank you very much. In fact, I've heard many accounts of what transpired. Yesterday I heard another one which involves, I think the name of the man is Seydou Abogri or something. The man who was installed outside Boku and brought in. A warrant was issued for him. That warrant was standing until recently when it was withdrawn. So he comes into town and the celebration starts on his side. So they fired gunshot for 2 nights straight. In fact, they had to take the other side, decided not to respond until a young girl was killed on the 3rd day. That's when the fighting erupted once again, and people were killed. Up to 20 people have been killed. The paramount chief of the Kusauk traditional area has even gone to the extent of pointing fingers at the vice president and even saying that they are banning campaign activities of the governing party at Boku. Question is, how would the current issue be resolved? There are people who are surprised that that was even allowed, that the man was allowed to come back to town, knowing that his return to Boku will create further conflicts. So far, we are yet to hear anything comprehensive from government as to how they intend to deal with the problem in Boku. But let's talk about conflict. Let's talk about an international one. And I'll just share with you a few updates from Al Jazeera just now, 2nd November. At least 20 people have been killed across Gaza since dawn, according to Al Jazeera's team on the ground, including 9 in Nuseirat, 3 in As-Saftawi, and 8 in Beit Lahia. Then at least 25 towns and villages in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley came under heavy Israeli air attacks on Friday, killing dozens of people, according to local authorities. And then it continues. It says the third phase of a postponed mass polio vaccination drive is scheduled to restart in Gaza, aid groups say, after the campaign stalled amid Israeli attacks and mass displacement of North Gaza's population, which has been under military siege for almost 1 month. The other update is that Israel's genocide in Gaza has killed at least 43,259 Palestinians and wounded 101,827 since October 7, 2023. An estimated 1,139 people were killed in Israel during the Hamas-led attacks that day, and more than 200 were taken captive. And it says in Lebanon, at least 2,897 people have been killed and 13,150 people wounded in Israel attacks since the war on Gaza began, with 30 people killed across the country in the past 24 hours, the Lebanese Health Ministry says. And then let me read to you this very interesting point. It says the Israeli public has forgotten about Gaza. Israeli commentator. And it says Israeli political commentator Ori Goldberg has told Al Jazeera from Tel Aviv that the worsening war in Gaza does not require any kind of justification from the government. Quote, the general consensus in Israel is that the war in Gaza has become pointless, that there are no military achievements to be gained, and the Israeli public has forgotten about Gaza, he said. He added that there are some leftists who have said they refuse to fight in Gaza, but will definitely go fight in Lebanon. What is happening in Gaza simply does not exist in the Israeli public consciousness, end quote, he said. So let's go back to that issue. We have a few minutes more to go. Your thoughts on it, and then I'll take thoughts on it.
Spend 1 or 2 minutes, and then I can hand that subject over to Uncle Kwesi, because that's his area, and all of us learn a lot from him when he's talking about these issues. Yes, I'm just surprised that the world will be sitting aloof and watching Israel brutalize innocent citizens like this. I just cannot understand. I try to. I know they have issues. There are historical issues. Israel occupying part of the West Bank and the Gaza, they have all kinds of problems. But you see, when it comes to war, for me, I am against war, wherever it is happening. And I always want to support the underdog, or I hate the aggressor every time. I do know that this particular war in Gaza now, it was started by the October 7, the Hamas and all of that, but that was not the beginning of the crisis itself. You know, the issue has been there already, and I think that Netanyahu just had a good basis to just use that, and then get into trying to just kill children, women, and innocent people, and the world just looking on. United Nations looking on. Everybody is looking on, and I can't make any sense out of it. And now today it was on the news that they are even warning United Nations organizations. United Nations organizations are really warning the world that if something is not done, you know, they are going to wipe out a whole tribe, a whole group of people, you know. And I can't see how this should be happening, and I'm disappointed in the big powers, you know. In the same vein, I do not support the war in Ukraine as well. Once it is war, and I can see that there's a superpower that is trying to bully, because you see, Israel if Israel were left alone, and they are not supported by the West, especially by Britain and by United States, although the Israel itself has some power, some ammunition, I'm sure it will be tough. It will be a very tough war for them. But because they are also supported again by the Western world, you know. So how could this happen in the United Nations? Is it useless? Is it? And then Christians, the Christian community, that is where my frustration, the biggest frustration lies. Even friends who are Christians, you know, they just go back into the Bible and they try to use some old biblical stories to support Israel to continue. I don't believe that God, for those who believe in God, I don't think that God supports this kind of carnage, you know. So I am just disappointed. I will just yield the platform for Agekwesi to finish it up, and I know he will have a lot to say about this, except to let everybody know that I'm so disappointed, and I believe that the whole world, whether you are Christian or whatever, we shouldn't support this level of killing. It's not good at all, and I don't think God supports it. That's my point, yeah.
Yes, Mr. Brown.
Well, Sana, generations which will come after us would see us as a bunch of useless and principled people who allowed a genocide of this proportion to be carried out against the Palestinian people and against the Lebanese people. My grandchildren and great-grandchildren would one day ask, how did we allow this to happen? The official statistics talks about 43,000, 44,000 Palestinians dead. That does not include those who are still buried in the rubble, whose bodies have not been identified. We are talking about 80,000 people killed in 1 year. We are talking about the largest number of journalists killed in any conflict in the world throughout history. And the Ghana Journalists Association has not found it necessary to cough on the matter. We are talking about the killing of medical practitioners, nurses and doctors in their hundreds. And the Ghana Medical Association is silent. I can't believe it. We are talking about the killing of children. Yesterday, I saw a video of a 5-week-old baby killed in an incubator. 5-week-old baby killed in an incubator. This 5-week-old baby lost her father. Some 3 weeks ago, the father was killed. Innocent father, civilian, was killed. And we are looking on unconcerned. Israel is not fighting Hamas in Gaza. The people Israel is killing in Gaza are not Hamas. The people Israel is killing in Gaza are elderly women, old men, children. Women and children constitute 70% of those who have been killed in Gaza. And we are looking on. We are not taking any action. Israel can do as it likes. It will not be called to order. Sana, this is a huge statement about the commitment of the world to principle and the commitment of the world to defending innocent civilians from aggression, from genocide and so on. This is a huge statement. Look, the Israeli ambassador to the UN, at a Security Council meeting, gets up and tears up the UN Charter in front of the world, tears the UN Charter, says it's useless. He tears it up, and there are no consequences. The Israeli ambassador tears the UN Charter in front of the world at the Security Council meeting. No consequence. The Israeli government declares the UN Secretary General persona non grata. He cannot enter Israel. There are no consequences. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. You understand? So Israel, a member state of the UN, one country, out of nearly 200 countries, has no respect for the UN, no respect for the Security Council. It does as it likes. The UN sends its peacekeepers, including Ghanaian soldiers, to South Lebanon to protect the peace, to create the conditions for peace and so on. Israel turns its guns on the peacekeepers, the UNIFIL mission. There are no consequences. France issues a statement of condemnation. Germany issues a statement of condemnation. Poland issues a statement of condemnation. Matter closed. The next day, the misnamed Israeli Defense Force still continues to fire UNIFIL positions in South Lebanon. No consequence. Look, all of these so-called superpowers and so on, America and so on, Britain, why did they invade Libya and kill Gaddafi? The allegations they made against Gaddafi does not amount to 0.005% of what Israel is doing in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iraq. And yet they assassinated Gaddafi. They killed Gaddafi. They killed Gaddafi. They overthrew his government and created chaos in Libya. Saddam Hussein, did he do 1% of what Netanyahu is doing in West Asia? 1%. And yet, they invaded Iraq and killed 2 million people to get rid of Saddam Hussein. Double standards, hypocrisy, unbelievable hypocrisy. I can't believe it. You understand? Now, there's this pretension, the US is pretending to be interested in peace, is pretending to be a broker of a ceasefire and so on. The weapons being dropped on Gaza, being dropped on Yemen, being dropped on Iraq, being dropped on Syria and in Lebanon are US weapons. The aeroplanes being used to drop those bombs are US weapons supplied by the US, paid for by the US taxpayer. And the US says it is interested in a ceasefire. The US can stop this war by stopping to pay for the weapons that are being used in committing the genocide. The US can stop this war by stopping to supply the aeroplanes that are being used to bomb innocent children and women. The US has no interest in stopping this war. Indeed, to a very large extent, the war is between the Palestinian people, the Lebanese people, the Syrian people, the Iraqi people, the Yemeni people, and the hegemony that the US is. So this pretension about US looking for ceasefire and so on, where is it coming from? The US is not interested in a ceasefire. The US is the chief promoter of this war. As we speak now, the US has sent soldiers on Israeli soil, together with the third air defense system and so on, to shoot down projectiles being fired from Lebanon in self-defense. Only yesterday, the US decided, the Pentagon decided, to send one of its most sophisticated battleships into the area to protect Israel. To protect Israel against what? Israel went into Iran, another country, and killed the leader of Hamas, who was the prime minister of Palestine, elected prime minister of Palestine, killed him. You understand? Israel went into Lebanon and killed the leader of a political party with representation in parliament, Nasrallah, and so on. Iran wants to respond in defense of its national integrity, in defense of its territorial integrity and so on, a right which is guaranteed by the UN and so on. America says, no, you cannot respond. If you respond, we will fight against you. It has moved soldiers on the ground. It has sent an air defense system in order to thwart Iranian efforts to defend itself. This is what we are dealing with. And for those who think that it all began on October 7th, I'm sorry, it didn't begin on October 7th. Indeed, the UN Secretary General has made it clear that it did not begin on October 7th. For 7 to 8 years, the Palestinian people have been subjected to this monstrosity, this genocide, this apartheid, this colonial rule has lasted for 76 long years. And some of the things that are happening simply do not make sense. My brother, listen to me. If you are anywhere in the world, you can be in Mongolia, you can be in Canada, you can be in Konsumokaya, anywhere. All you have to do is to declare yourself a Jew. And you automatically earn the right to return to Israel, to steal land, and to settle. Listen to me very carefully. But if you're a Palestinian refugee, anywhere, you are not allowed, you are not given the right to return to your homeland, to come to your own home, to come to your own land, and so on. If this is not apartheid, what is? If this is not apartheid law, what is? And then my brother has spoken about some people in the Christian community misinformed, totally misinformed people in the Christian community, totally misinformed. I don't play religious games. I don't believe in these religious games or so. But the fact of the matter is that Israel proclaims itself as a Jewish state. Most Orthodox Jews do not accept that Israel is a Jewish state. In fact, they make the point that the driving ideology is Zionism, and that Zionism is not Judaism, and so on. And I think that we need to recognize that. But even if we accept that Israel is a Jewish state, even if we accept that, Judaism does not recognize the New Testament. Judaism actually rejects Jesus Christ as the Son of God. Judaism accepts only the Old Testament, does not accept the New Testament, and believes that Jesus the Christ is an impostor. So if you're a Christian and you're supporting this monstrosity, go back to your religion, go back to its teachings and so on. Many people decide to go on pilgrimages and they think that they are going on a pilgrimage to Israel, Christians and so on. Why? The Church of Nativity, the Church of Nativity, which is the birthplace, the original birthplace of Jesus the Christ, is not in Israel but in Palestine. The people who are being bombed in Palestine and so on, they include Jews, they include Christians, they include Muslims, they include people of the Baha'i faith and all religions. The Zionist authority does not discriminate on account of religion. I am sick and tired of this genocide. This genocide has to be brought an end, at least to free our conscience somehow. And I'm so very disappointed in the government of Ghana for many reasons. When the government of Ghana declares that It is fully in support of Israel in the committal of this genocide. I want to make it clear that that government, that president does not speak on my behalf. I'm a Ghanaian. And that president, that government is not speaking on my behalf. I am not in full support of Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people. I cannot be. You understand? Now, what surprises me is that Ghanaian soldiers that we sent to Lebanon to help keep the peace are being fired upon. And our government is mute. Our government is silent over the fate of the Ghanaian soldiers. And we expect these Ghanaian soldiers to be loyal to us, to defend us in the face of attack. And when Israel opens its guns on Ghanaian soldiers, we keep quiet. What a shame. What an absolute shame it is. I cannot defend the actions of the Ghanaian government. Your own soldiers are being fired upon, and you cannot condemn it. Even when Germany, when Italy, when Britain, and so on, are condemning these atrocities being committed against Ghanaian soldiers, our government is silent. Our government is mute. But you know, Senna, no matter what happens, Palestine will be free. No matter what happens, Palestine will win this war. And an independent and free Palestinian state will be established, whether President Akufo-Addo and other supporters of Israel like it or not. An independent, free Palestinian state will be established.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before we bring this to a close today, this one says, good morning, Senator. The war in Gaza is a U.S.-supervised genocide. This will not stop until the Muslim world unite to fight this genocide. There's one more comment coming in from Dr. Ishmael Dodo, who says, my greetings to senior comrade and brother Uncle Kwesi. He continues to inspire me. I have these 2 points to contribute towards the discussion. The Boku crisis raises geopolitical concerns. We need to be careful to nip it in the bud. The border areas could spark off terrorist incursions because of the proximity to the Sahel region. Let's keep a serious eye on it. Secondly, the NDC must raise consciousness about the impact of the Boku crisis on the fortunes of the party during the elections. Then this one came on our WhatsApp line. Say doing Boku. Said the excavation of the Boku conflict recently is caused by the president and Baumia. 1. The president went to Nalerugu and promised Nairi the arrest warrant on the imposter will be withdrawn, and that happened. 2. Realizing the pressure from the Kusau people, Attorney General pretended that he was challenging in Supreme Court to reinstate the arrest warrant. He subsequently abandoned the case. That night, the imposter chief was smuggled in without the knowledge of the command stationed in Boku. How do we then trust this government? Any elder seen to be engaging with government in this issue is a lunatic. Our values and culture as Kusau people has been injured. It will be cured by ourselves, the people of Kusau. And so if you sit there as chieftaincy minister issuing appeals, you are insulting us. The overlord has declared and Seidu Boku sent that. I guess what we seek is peace. But somebody must lead the process. A neutral party must lead the process. And I would like to say a big thank you to my panel for today. We had a 2-member panel. In fact, we're expecting Courage Nombi to join us from the Socialist Movement of Ghana, and of course Francis Xavier, who is Honorable Member of Parliament for the people of Medina. They both did not make it, but Lawyer Alipo, who is president of Links or Lawyers in Search of Democracy, of course, Kwame Kwesi Pratt Jr., who is General Secretary of the Socialist Movement of Ghana, were adequate enough to deal with these issues. And I want to thank you very much for making time to stay through the show and for sharing your thoughts with us on the matter of all talk shows, Alhaji and Alhaji. We are back same time next week with another edition of the show. Let me say a big thank you to my friends at Keche Clothings, and of course to my producers and the crew here at Pan-African Television and the many other affiliate stations who gave us their platforms. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the weekend and have a fruitful week. We'll see you next week.
Land of freedom, he's the Redeemer. has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land